Hey guys, welcome back. This is the third Sunday of Lent. We get our readings today from Exodus, Paul's letter to the Corinthians, and the Gospel of John. So, a lot to unpack, like always. From these readings, the first thing is with Exodus. So in Exodus we have the Ten Commandments. We're pretty familiar with these. We know what they are. We know how to follow them or how we're supposed to follow them. The Catechism of the Catholic Church does a great job of breaking the Ten Commandments down to what the highest level of insight into each one of those commandments. So I won't go into that because that would take a very, very long time to go through. But they're all very important. So we have the first three being directly pertaining to God and how we love God, right? And so we know what those are. We know that we have no other gods besides our God. We don't take the Lord's name in vain, and we keep holy the Sabbath day. And then the next set of commandments are how we show love to our neighbor, to fellow man. Honor your mother and father. You shall not kill, you shall not commit adultery, don't steal, don't bear false witness, don't covet your neighbor's goods or your neighbor's wife. So we know all those. We're familiar with those. I think what we forget sometimes, though, with these is that this is God showing us how to love, right? Like it's almost like a love letter, like an instructional love letter in some sort of way. But it's exactly what God asks of us, right? And so you have the Israelites, and they've come out of slavery from Egypt, and it's almost like they're lost. Like they don't know what to do. They don't know how to communicate with this God. They're really struggling, and so God gives them very plain directions. You love me above all things, which is very important because they're very good at putting their faith in false idols. You don't take my name in vain. So again, very important, because what they were doing in those times is that they would use God almost as if he was like a genie or a magician. You know, they would say, you know, God, if you're so great, do this for me, or God, I wish you did that for me. And so they would take the Lord's name in vain in that kind of way, not just in a way that is using foul language or something like that. And then lastly, the keeping holy Sabbath day. God rested, and so he wants you to rest too, and he wants you in that day of rest to just be with him. Right, and then we have the next set of how we love other people, because other people are God's greatest gift. That's God's greatest creation. Like, if you can't find ways to love his greatest creation, you're also failing to love him. Right? Think of it in a way with a parent and a child. When my child creates artwork, it doesn't matter the beauty of the artwork or the quality of the artwork. I love it because they made it for me. You know, the same way for you as parents, or for those of you who are watching that have nieces or nephews or little siblings or something. You love it because what they've created, not always because it's a perfect creation. We are not perfect creations. We are fallen, we are broken, we are hurting, but we are still called to love each other. And that's extremely, extremely important. So God lays all of this out. It's this beautiful love letter that I think we look at as this like archaic set of rules, and that's not what it is. I mean, for those of you who are married, you know how to love your spouse. And if you don't know, I'm sure your spouse at some point in time has told you, this is how I feel loved when you do this or when you do that. It's not when you do these other things, right? So God's trying to point that out. This is how you love me and how I love you, and this is how I need you to love my creation. You're not going to like everything about what I've created, but I need you to love my creation. In Paul's letter to Corinthians, remember the church in Corinth, we've talked about this a lot, always with a sense of importance far greater than their actual importance in the world. And Paul tries to remind them that quite a bit. One of the things I want to point out here is the line of the Jews demand signs and Greeks look for wisdom. And the reason why I want to look at those and point those out, this goes back to what was happening with the commandments. They were always looking for a sign. There was always something that had to be more obvious of a physical type of thing for God to exist. Because remember, the God of Abraham, our God the Father, is not somebody who had a physical body in the same way until Jesus Christ is born thousands of years later. And so they were always looking for that sign, whatever that sign was going to be that pointed to an actual God. And then the Greeks looking for wisdom. Paul is talking to both the Jews and the Gentiles, because he understands that the faith is not just for the Jews, right? That Jesus did not come into the world only for the Jews. He came for the Greeks, the Gentiles, everyone. Like he came, and his mission was to all people. So Paul is talking to these two groups of people and picking out what the differences are. And then he says, those who are called, Jews and Greeks alike, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. He is the sign and the wisdom. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength. Christ is the fulfillment of the sign. He is the fulfillment of the wisdom. He is all things. And Paul continues to try to point this out, which brings us to the gospel, right? And it says in the end of these verses, while he was in Jerusalem for the feast of Passover, many began to believe in his name when they saw the signs he was doing. Again, the Jews were looking for the signs of who the Messiah really was, because at this time there were a lot of people who said they were fulfillment of the prophecy. They were the Messiah, that they were the ones who God had blessed, but this was the only one who was God incarnate. And so they start to see the things that he's doing, like in this account where he's driving the people out of the marketplace and he's turning over the tables, and he's very passionately upset about how his father's house has been now used as a place for desecration instead of worship. And so they see that, and they start to see these things, right? They know about the healings that have happened. They know about the driving out of demons that has happened, and they see this happen, and they start to believe because they've seen it, the signs. But Jesus did not trust himself to them. He knew them all and did not need anyone to testify about human nature. He himself understood it well. Jesus understood human nature. And with that human nature, I think he understood how broken we are. That we are desperately seeking signs for God and his existence in our lives instead of trusting in him. This is something that I've fallen into before. It's a trap that's very similar, that we go through hardships and tough times, and we kind of ask the question of, God, where are you in this? Or when we're discerning something, we'll say, God, if you give me a sign, then I'll know that this decision is better than that decision. Instead of just praying about which decision is best in our lives. Instead of just sitting down and saying, okay, God, I'm going to do my best to love you and to love my neighbors. And that's the first thing. That's the most important thing. Now, with these two decisions, this or that, which one glorifies you? Which one allows me to do a better job of loving you and loving my neighbor? I had an opportunity a few years ago, before coming here to All Saints, where a position in ministry had opened up for me. And I wasn't sure what to do. And I remember saying to a friend of mine I was talking on the phone with, and I said, if God just gives me a sign, I'll know what to do. And I didn't get a sign. There was no billboard on the side of the road with flashing lights. There was no phone call from, oh, look, God is calling on my iPhone. There's no caller ID. There was nothing. There was no sign. But what there was somebody who said to me, why don't you just go in the chapel and pray about where God wants you to be? Why don't you go and pray about this decision and figure out which one of them is going to allow you a greater opportunity to grow in your love for God, your love for other people. Like maybe there's something with the job that you're currently in that is just causing you a lot of anxiety and stress, and that's not from God. So maybe it's that. And I did. I sat down and I prayed and I thought about it for a long time, and I realized that one of the places in my heart that was not good was sitting in traffic for my commute, and it was awful, and I hated it. It's definitely a place I need to work on. The amount of impatience that I have in lines in general and in traffic and things like that. And so I really thought about it, and I discerned, and I realized that God was calling me to something greater because it was going to allow me to get that hurt and pain and anger out of my life. But I never would have done that if I would have just sat there looking for a sign. Jesus goes into the temple and he sees these things, and it upsets him. It breaks his heart because they're not loving God. They're just going through motions. Don't go through the motions. Don't look for signs. Have faith. Pray to God. Yes, signs are always going to be out there. That is part of it. But if you're praying for one and waiting for one, you're missing the opportunity to love God better and to love your neighbor. From all of us here at All Saints, please continue to pray for us and know that we're praying for you as well. And we look forward to seeing you next week as we continue this Lenten journey. God bless.